All right. We're diving into IELTS Speaking, Part 1 today. Specifically, those questions about your daily routine.
Yeah, these are the questions that trip people up sometimes.
For sure. I know we've talked about the basics before, but we're going deeper today.
Absolutely.
Like we're using that IELTS Success Talk episode
Yeah, that's a great one.
to kind of dig into how to really impress the examiner.
Right.
Because Part 1 is more than just a warm-up, right?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It's your chance to make a good first impression.
Yeah.
Show off your natural speaking
Oh,
style.
for sure. That's what the podcast was saying, too. Like not sounding robotic.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But the examiner is also listening for some key things,
Okay.
like your fluency and how well you can put your thoughts together,
Mm-hmm.
the words you choose,
Yeah, the vocabulary stuff.
your grammar, and of course, how clearly you speak.
That's a lot to think about.
It is, but Part 1 is actually the perfect place to shine in those areas
I see.
because it's conversational.
Hmm.
You can really show off your natural fluency and your vocabulary.
So how do we do that?
Well, the podcast talked about that 3-step answer structure.
Right. Direct answer, elaborate example.
Exactly. But it's not just about following a formula.
I see.
It's more like using these steps as building blocks to tell a mini story.
Interesting. Like how?
So let's say the question is, what's a typical day like for you?
Okay. Classic Part 1 question.
You start with a clear opening, like, my day usually begins around 7 a.m.
Direct answer. Got it.
Then you add some intrigue. Maybe I like to start my day with a quick run in the park
Okay.
to clear my head.
Elaboration.
Exactly. And finally, you captivate the examiner with a vivid detail.
Oh, I like that. Give me an example.
Something like, this morning I saw the most incredible sunrise when I was running. It cast a golden glow over the entire park. Just stunning.
Wow, that paints a picture for sure.
Right, so you're not just saying words, you're sharing an experience.
That makes sense.
Right.
But how does this work with other types of questions?
Well, good question.
Like what about, do you enjoy cooking? Well, that's not really about my routine.
It's still about showing who you are,
Okay.
and you can adapt that 3-step structure.
Okay, I'm listening.
So your direct answer could be, I wouldn't say I'm a master chef, but I do enjoy cooking on weekends.
Right.
Then you elaborate, maybe it's a great way to relax after a busy week and experiment with new flavors.
Oh, so instead of just saying yes or no,
Yeah.
you're giving context and personality.
Exactly. And to really make it memorable, add an example.
Okay.
Last weekend, I tried a new pasta recipe that turned out surprisingly well. My family loved it.
Nice. So you've shown vocabulary fluency and a bit about your life.
All in a concise answer.
Yeah, all without just rambling on and on.
Exactly. That's the key, right?
Yeah.
Engage the examiner, but don't overdo it.
This is starting to make a lot of sense, but, the podcast also had that role play section.
Oh, yeah.
I found it helpful, but maybe a bit too basic. Can we, dissect those examples, maybe uncover some hidden gems?
Absolutely. Role plays are fantastic for practice.
Yeah.
But let's look at them with a critical eye.
I like it.
So in one example, the candidate answered, what's a typical day like for you? With, my day usually begins around 7 a.m. I like to start with a quick run in the park, which helps me feel refreshed.
Okay, that's all right.
Right. Hits those first 2 steps, but it's missing that wow factor.
Oh, you're right. It needs that specific example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine if they added, this morning, the sunrise was incredible, casting a golden glow over the entire park. It really set the tone for a positive day.
Way better.
Right. Now it's a personal experience, not just a generic answer.
It's like you feel like you're there with them.
Exactly. That's what makes a Part 1 response stand out.
Makes sense.
Let's look at another one. Do you usually do the same things every day?
Oh, yeah, I remember this one.
Mm-hmm. The podcast candidate said, yes, most of my weekdays follow a routine, which helps me stay organized. However, I try to add some variety, like experimenting with new dinner recipes or trying different workouts in the morning.
It's a good answer, right?
It is, but think about the vocabulary.
Okay.
Words like monotonous and energizing could really elevate this response.
Oh, I see.
Instead of, I try to add some variety.
Yeah.
Imagine saying, to avoid monotony, I actively seek ways to energize my routine.
Wow. Yeah. That sounds so much better.
Right. Subtle, but powerful.
And it shows off your vocabulary.
Exactly. Remember, even small tweaks can make a big difference to your score.
This is great. I'm realizing that it's not just about knowing the structure.
Right?
It's about using vocabulary strategically
Absolutely.
and showing your personality.
Yes. It's about turning everyday experiences into these little stories that highlight your language skills.
And who you are as a person.
Exactly.
This is so helpful. I'm already feeling more confident about Part 1.
That's great to hear.
But But, before we move on, are there any common mistakes people make in part one, like things our listeners should avoid?
Oh, for sure. One of the biggest is getting too caught up in being grammatically perfect.
Oh, yeah, I've been there. And then you just end up sounding like a robot.
Exactly. Remember, fluency and coherence are key in part one.
So it's better to be natural than to be perfect.
Right. Don't be afraid of a few minor grammar slips if it means you sound more like yourself.
Good point. What else?
Another common one is giving super short answers.
Oh, like just one or two words?
Yeah. Some people think it's just part one. I'll save my energy for later.
But part one is your chance to make a good first impression, right?
Exactly. Don't waste that opportunity.
So even though the questions seem simple,
Hmm.
it's crucial to really use them to showcase your abilities.
Absolutely. It sets the tone for the whole speaking test.
Wow, this has been so insightful. I feel like we've uncovered a whole new layer of understanding about IELTS Speaking Part 1.
I'm glad to hear it.
And, I bet our listeners feeling a lot more prepared now, too.
I hope so. It's all about having the right tools and strategies.
Exactly. And practice, of course.
Always. But knowing what to practice is half the battle.
For sure. Well, we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
So let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll explore some more tips and strategies to help our listener truly ace this crucial first stage of the speaking test.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. We've been really breaking down IELTS Speaking Part 1.
Yeah, going way beyond just that basic three-step structure.
Exactly.
Like we're uncovering all these little nuances that can really make your answers stand out.
And remember, Part 1 is just the beginning.
Right. It's like setting the stage for the rest of the speaking test. So
Exactly.
you want to make a good impression.
Absolutely.
Speaking of making a good impression,
Yeah.
the IELTS Success Talk podcast mentions something about recording yourself
Oh, yeah?
while you practice.
That's a great tip.
I mean, besides cringing at the sound of your own voice,
Right.
what's the benefit of doing that?
It's all about self-awareness.
Okay.
When you listen back to those recordings, you can really pick up on things.
Like?
Your pacing, how fast or slow you're speaking, your fluency, are you hesitant or smooth?
Oh, and those filler words.
Oh, yes. The ums and likes.
I'm so guilty of those.
We all are. But we don't always realize how often we use them.
That's true.
Recording yourself helps you catch those habits and work on minimizing them.
So it's like having a personal coach.
Exactly. Someone will point out those areas where you can improve.
That's really helpful.
And you can also pay attention to your pronunciation.
Oh, right.
Are you stressing the right syllables?
Mm-hmm.
Speaking clearly?
At a good pace.
Exactly. These things become more obvious when you hear yourself.
This makes me want to grab my phone and start recording right now.
You do it.
But speaking of pronunciation, I know it's one of those 4 assessment criteria,
It is.
but how much should our listener worry about, perfecting their accent?
That's a common concern.
Yeah.
But the IELTS doesn't expect you to have a native-like accent.
So it's okay if I have an accent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What matters most is that you're understandable.
So more about clarity than sounding like a BBC newsreader.
Exactly. Focus on speaking clearly, enunciating your words, and using intonation that makes sense.
Okay, that's good to know. It takes some of the pressure off.
Definitely.
But shifting gears a bit, I remember the podcast mentioned something about thinking of your daily routine as a story.
Oh, yes.
Can you talk more about that?
That's where we go beyond just describing our day.
Okay.
It's about uncovering the why behind your routine.
The why.
Yeah, like what does it reveal about your values,
Oh, interesting.
your priorities, or even your aspirations?
So instead of saying, I wake up at 7 a.m., I might say, I'm an early riser because I value those quiet morning hours for reflection.
Exactly. You're adding a layer of personality and motivation.
Makes you more memorable.
Right. It's like you're inviting the examiner into your world.
I like that. It turns those simple part 1 questions into an opportunity to share a bit of who you are.
Absolutely. And that authenticity can really make you stand out.
It makes sense.
Because remember, the IELTS isn't just about language skills.
Right.
It's about communication.
Being able to connect with the examiner.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. But, even with all this advice, I imagine some listeners might still be nervous about the speaking test.
Oh, of course. Nerves are totally normal.
So any tips for dealing with those pre-test jitters?
One thing I recommend is visualization.
Oh, okay.
Before the test, take a few minutes to visualize yourself in the exam room.
Like mental rehearsal.
Exactly. Picture yourself feeling confident and calm.
So you're kind of preparing your mind and body for the experience.
Precisely.
That's cool.
Another helpful technique is focusing on your breath.
Deep breaths.
Yes. Slow, deep breaths can really calm your nerves and clear your head.
That makes sense.
And don't underestimate the power of positive self-talk.
Oh, yeah, I'm a big believer in that. Like, reminding yourself of all the hard work you've put in.
Exactly. Affirm your ability to succeed.
Yeah, like, I've got this.
Exactly. Remember, the examiners are not there to trick you or make you feel bad.
They want you to do well.
Exactly.
Sometimes we create our own anxieties by overthinking everything.
It's true. And it's also helpful to remember that the IELTS is just one step on your journey.
It's not the be-all and end-all.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what key takeaways should our listener focus on for their IELTS speaking part 1?
Practice, practice, practice.
Of course, but practice with a purpose.
Exactly. Focus on fluency and clear communication.
Don't get hung up on making every sentence perfect.
Right. And use that 3-step structure as your guide.
Direct answer, elaborate example.
But remember, inject your personality. Tell your story.
Make it memorable.
Yes. And record yourself. It's the best way to pinpoint areas for improvement.
Catch those filler words.
Exactly. And most importantly,
Yeah.
stay calm.
Breathe deeply.
Trust in your preparation.
You've got this. Okay, so we've tackled part 1, but what about part 3 of the IELTS speaking test?
Ah, yes. Part 3. That's where things get a little more challenging.
I bet. It sounds pretty intense.
It's definitely a step up from part 1.
In what way?
Well, part 1 is all about you, right? Your personal experiences, your daily routines.
Right.
But part 3 is more about broader issues.
Like what kind of issues?
Oh, things like the impact of technology on society or the importance of education.
Wow, okay. Big picture stuff.
Exactly. And the examiner is going to ask you to analyze those issues.
So it's not just describing your day anymore.
No, you need to be able to express opinions, give reasons, maybe even speculate about the future.
Oh, man. That sounds tough.
It can be, but it's also a chance to really show off your skills.
Like what kind of skills?
Well, remember those assessment criteria we talked about?
Fluency, vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation.
Exactly. In part 3, the examiner is really paying attention to how well you can develop an argument.
So how logically you can explain your ideas.
Exactly. And they're listening for a wider range of vocabulary and grammar.
Makes sense. You can't just rely on simple sentences and everyday words.
Right. You need to show that you can handle more complex language.
Okay, so for our listener who's facing part 3, what are some strategies they can use to really impress the examiner?
Well, first of all, don't rush your answer.
Take a breath.
Exactly. Take a moment to think about the question.
Process it.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to use phrases like, "That's an interesting question," or "Let me think about that for a moment."
Oh, so it's okay to pause for a second.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It shows the examiner that you're taking the question seriously.
And it gives you a chance to gather your thoughts.
Right. Now, when you are ready to answer, try to approach the question from different angles.
Okay, so like think about different perspectives.
Exactly. Consider the pros and cons, the potential consequences, even your own personal experiences.
So you're not just giving a one-sided answer.
No, you're showing that you can think critically and see the bigger picture.
I like it. It's like you're building a more complete picture.
Exactly. And don't forget about examples.
Oh, right. Even in part 3.
Yes. Specific examples make your arguments more convincing and relatable.
Okay, so like if I'm talking about the impact of technology on education, I could mention a specific app that I've used.
Perfect. It brings the abstract idea down to earth.
Makes it more real.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to acknowledge the complexity of an issue.
Like you don't have to have all the answers.
Exactly. Sometimes it's more impressive to express thoughtful uncertainty than to offer a simplistic solution.
So it's more about showing that you can engage in a thoughtful discussion.
Absolutely. The examiner isn't looking for perfection.
They just want to see that you can think critically.
And communicate effectively.
This has been such a fantastic deep dive into the IELTS speaking test. We've explored all the parts, uncovered some really valuable strategies.
And hopefully our listener is feeling more prepared and confident.
For sure. And, you know, it's important to remember that the IELTS is just one step in your journey.
It doesn't define you.
It's a snapshot of your abilities at a particular moment.
Exactly.
So, to our listener, we're cheering you on. You've got this.
Yeah.